Hello everyone, today we are starting the story of an overworked intern veterinarian who spent countless hours working overtime. Fortunately, he gets a second chance at life, reborn as a human. Unfortunately, he ends up possessing the body of Han Saiha, a villainous extra in a novel he used to enjoy reading. He can't help but regret his luck, thinking, why Han Saiha of all people? Not only is his magic talent practically useless, but he's also doomed to be killed by the main characters at the very beginning of the novel. Now, he must find a way to survive in this dangerous world, to live peacefully without crossing paths with the main characters, or worse, getting involved with them. Graduating from the academy becomes his top priority, because in a world where the plot is out to get him, blending in might be his only way out. Before we continue the story, please leave a like as today's like goal is 1,500 likes and hit the subscribe button for more videos. The story kicks off with an ominous thought echoing in the air. Reincarnation is like spinning a roulette wheel. You might end up as anything, from a graceful animal to a cockroach scuttling around the floor. So if you're fortunate enough to be reborn as a human again, it's like hitting the jackpot. Our protagonist is one of those lucky few who survived the cosmic game of chance. The roulette decided to give him another shot at life as a human. But here's the kicker. In his previous life, he quite literally worked himself to death. Things seemed to be going well for him in this new round until he realized something unsettling. The body he now inhabits belongs to an extra from a dark, depressing novel he once enjoyed. And not just any extra. The poor soul is a one-time villain who gets killed by the protagonist in the very first chapter. This unfortunate character is none other than the hopeless fool named Han Sia. A panel lays out the unfortunate details of his character. Han Sia, an F-rank Tamer with zero noteworthy abilities, teeters on the edge of complete failure. His interest in black magic seals his tragic fate when he learns it's a big no-no, but by then, it's too late. To make matters worse, Han Sia's personality is as petty as they come, driven by greed he can't seem to shake, leading him to his inevitable death as just another forgettable extra. As if things couldn't get bleaker, his ability stats are downright dismal. A measly 45 mana, 13 stamina, 20 intelligence, 17 perception, and a whopping 4 charm points. Let's be honest, a potato might have better stats. In the present, our protagonist, now inhabiting the body of Han Sia, finds himself in quite the predicament. He mentally curses the spinning wheel of fate for sticking him with such a character. Seriously, out of all the people, this is who he gets. If he got any say in the matter, he'd at least have gone for someone promising like a hero, or at the very least, someone good-looking. But jokes aside, the reality of his situation starts to weigh on him. Possessing a one-time villain is bad enough, but doing so in such a dire context, that's just adding insult to injury. The current setting is an auxiliary facility for dark mages, a place where Han Sia, who once held promise due to his natural magical potential, was briefly acknowledged before being cast aside. It's like being told you're going to the cool kids table only to find out it's the janitor's closet. Ostracized at the academy for his lack of real-world skills, Han Sia has now ended up here, seemingly on the brink of joining a dark magic organization. He stands in front of these mysterious figures, but they seem more interested in ignoring his presence. One of them inquires about his identity, and another quickly dismisses him as just a kid begging to join their organization. They casually mention that this boy is a student at Ardell Academy, which sparks a wicked idea in one of the men. With an evil glint in his eye, he considers the potential usefulness of having an Academy student around and decides to take advantage of the situation. Han Sia feels a surge of panic rising within him. It's like realizing you walked into a horror movie and you're the clueless character who's about to make a bad decision. He debates whether to follow them or not, but quickly concludes that he has no other option. After all, he didn't exactly level up for a boss battle. Realizing he can't defeat them, he reluctantly agrees and follows, each step more nerve-wracking than the last. As they walk, one of the men casually asks if he knows the procedure for joining their organization. Han Sia replies confidently that of course he knows the procedure, all the while internally panicking. He's acutely aware that once he draws the blood of a member and swears an oath to dark magic, there's no turning back. It's like signing a contract with a phone company. Good luck getting out of that one. How could he not know about it? He recalls that the Dark Mage organization he, or rather Han Sia, since he's now stuck in this body, is about to join as the typical Kleich evil force destined for destruction at the hands of the novel's protagonist. The grim reality dawns on him. If he goes through with his Dark Mage contract, he's doomed to be killed by the hero, and getting taken out by the good guy doesn't sound like a perk. So instead of blindly following these shady characters, he realizes he needs to figure out how to escape this death trap, and fast. He is lost in thought, anxiety gnawing at him as he contemplates his impending doom. Suddenly, a notification appears, synchronizing to Han Sia's perspective, and just as the synchronization process completes, the system bluntly warns him to escape. It's not every day your life comes with a flashing neon sign that says, "Run." He is completely taken aback by the sudden appearance of what feels like a cheat code materializing out of thin air. Apparently, his luck hasn't entirely abandoned him just yet, but as he stares at the warning on the screen, he's momentarily stunned, trying to process this unexpected lifeline. Just then, a loud, eerie scream echoes through the area like the tortured wail of someone in agony, sending his nerves into overdrive. One of the men asks his companion about the unsettling sound, wondering if something had gone awry in the basement. The men decide to check out the situation in the basement first. One of them turns to the protagonist and tells him to wait here, making it clear that any attempt to flee would be met with certain death. Just your typical friendly advice. He sternly advises him to stay put if he values his life. Han Sia, now playing along, assures them he understands. Without wasting any time, the men rush off to investigate the noise, leaving him alone. Seizing the opportunity, he realizes this might be his only chance to escape. Once he's sure they're out of sight, he starts to run, heart pounding and breath held. But there's one small problem: he has no idea where the exit is. Nothing like running blindly into the unknown to spice up your day. Exhausted, he stops for a moment to catch his breath, muttering to himself about how he's been running around like a lunatic without the slightest idea where the exit might be. It's like being lost in a maze with no cheese in sight. He pauses for a moment and notices a locked door ahead of him and sees some light approaching, making him wonder if he's heading in the right direction. But it's just a hunch, nothing more. Before he can make a move, a sudden voice startles him. It seems that a member of the dark magic group is passing by, so he quickly rushes to hide. From his hiding spot, he listens as two men discuss a kid who had escaped from their third basement floor. The realization hits him like a ton of bricks. They're talking about him. Panic surges through him, knowing that if they catch him, it's game over, and not the fun kind with a restart button. Just as the two men walk away, they speculate that the boy might be a spy from Ardell Academy. Once they're far enough away, he checks his surroundings to make sure the coast is clear. Satisfied that no one else is around, he rushes to open the door in front of him, but of course, it's locked. He desperately tries to force the door open, fully aware that his efforts are likely in vain. But hey, what's life without a little futile effort? Despite his best attempts, the door remains stubbornly shut, leaving him feeling utterly hopeless. Desperation begins to creep in as he realizes that in this situation, the only thing he can rely on is his memory. Though Han Sia may seem worthless, there has to be something he can do. It's not like he's trying to escape with a spoon from a prison cell, yet. Cursing under his breath, he mentally reviews his options, lamenting that while Han Sia lacks any talent for white magic, at least he was born with magic power coursing through his veins. However, the real issue is that this magic is wildly uncontrollable, leaving him clueless about how to channel it in the right direction. In other words, what he really needs is to control this magic power and focus. Determined, he concentrates intensely, managing to direct the flow of magic power into his fingertips. Placing his hand on the lock in front of him, he releases all of the magic, hoping against hope that it will open the door. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. He feels even more exhausted than he did from running, his breath coming in ragged gasps. As he catches his breath, he mutters to himself, admitting that his skills are far from adequate and that he has a long way to go. Just then, he senses a figure in the darkness behind him. It moves toward him. Its eyes glow ominously as it locks its gaze on him. Realizing something is approaching, Han Sia turns around, fully expecting this to be the end. But to his astonishment, it's not some terrifying beast. It's a little dragon of all things, roaring at him with an adorably high-pitched tone. Instead of feeling scared, he finds himself amazed. The tiny dragon approaches him and tugs at his robe, clearly indicating that it wants to be picked up. Perplexed but unable to resist, Han Sia scoops up the dragon, wondering how such a creature ended up here and why it seems so friendly toward him. As he ponders the situation, he coldly and directly tells the little dragon that he can't take it with him, explaining that managing himself is already a challenge. But as soon as the words leave his mouth, the little dragon's expression changes to one of shock, as if it can't believe what it's hearing. It starts acting out, crying like an innocent baby, making a fuss that could melt even the hardest of hearts. Han Sia, however, is determined to stay resolute. He tries to quiet the little creature with a cold-hearted resolve, but the cute dragon refuses to be silenced and continues its noisy protest. Clearly, this dragon has mastered the ancient art of guilt-tripping. With no other choice, Han Sia reluctantly decides to let the dragon tag along, feeling a growing sense of frustration. As they run, he mutters under his breath that the little dragon is doing this on purpose, making his life even more complicated. In his mind, he knows he can't adopt something he isn't capable of being responsible for, but then he suddenly stops in his tracks. A thought strikes him. Maybe he could use the dragon's power to his advantage. As he looks down at the little dragon, contemplating this new idea, his system suddenly pops up with a notification. It informs him that his taming ability has been unlocked and asks if he wishes to tame the little dragon. The system identifies the creature as a suspicious hatchling and displays its abilities. It's a level 2 with 50 magic power, along with decent strength, agility, and intelligence stats. It even has a flamethrower skill at level 1. Han-Sia is both surprised and slightly confused by this. What frustrates him even more is the absence of an accept button on the system screen. He realizes he'll have to tame the dragon the old-fashioned way, hands-on, because of course nothing in his life comes with an easy option. As he contemplates this, he silently warns himself not to push his luck too far. Still, he remarks that when it comes to taming, he actually has quite a bit of experience and talent. Feeling a bit smug, he boasts about his technique, using a few practice gestures to offer reassurance and build trust with the hatchling. Looking at the little dragon with a serious expression, he tells it to trust him, though deep down he's worried whether he's doing it right. To his relief, the little dragon seems to accept him as its contractor, floating into the air and releasing a glowing light, signaling that the taming was successful. As the dragon descends, Han-Sia wonders if he's truly succeeded in taming it, though he has a sneaking suspicion that there might be more to it. Cutting off his thoughts, Han-Sia decides to test his new pet's capabilities. He commands the little dragon, addressing it as Reptile, to complete its first task, breaking the lock on the door. The cute reptile obediently moves forward, its eyes glowing with determination. It leaps and bites the chain lock, snapping it instantly. Han-Sia is stunned, not expecting the lock to break so easily. With the lock broken, it seems their escape is finally within reach. Han-Sia praises the dragon for doing a great job, feeling a surge of hope that they might actually make it out alive. But just as that relief washes over him, he hears approaching footsteps, sending a wave of dread through his body. He looks back and sees the men who have spotted him, their faces twisting into sneers. They mockingly call him a rat and threaten to roast him alive if they catch him. Panic grips Han-Sia, paralyzing him with fear as he frantically wonders what to do. Forcing himself to think despite the terror, he realizes the men are getting closer. Suddenly, an idea pops into his head. He remembers a spell called Smog, the very first self-defense spell taught at the academy. It's a basic spell that creates a cloud of smoke for concealment, so simple that even someone with no magical talent could learn it. And let's be honest, now's the perfect time to embrace the basics. Although he knows the spell, Han-Sia has never actually used it before. But in this dire situation, he has no choice but to try. Without further delay, he steadies his breath and focuses his energy on his fingertips, imagining he's holding a gun. To his immense relief, it works. The light begins to form at his fingertips. The men halt in their tracks, momentarily thrown off guard. Seizing the opportunity, Han-Sia quickly casts the spell, creating a cloud of smoke that envelops them. Amazed and thrilled that his spell actually worked, he uses the distraction to flee and rushes toward the door. Just as he starts to open it, a sudden spectral hand appears out of nowhere, grabbing him by the neck. Shocked and unable to breathe, he feels the hand choking him, forcing him to collapse to the ground. His cute reptile companion dashes to his side, but all Han-Sia can think is that this might be the end. The man who cast the demonic spell sneers, declaring that the boy can escape as he pleases and that at least his death will be painless. How considerate, Han-Sia thinks, not feeling particularly grateful. But then he notices something. Despite his bravado, the man is sweating and seems worried about something. His companion is nowhere to be seen, and it becomes apparent that the spell he cast has consumed a large amount of his mana. Maybe there's a silver lining to this strangling after all. Han-Sia lies there, feeling a wave of hopelessness wash over him as he realizes just how dire his situation has become. Talk about the universe having a twisted sense of humor, reborn only to die again. Struggling to breathe, he desperately tries to think of a way to break free from the spell. Just when it seems all hope is lost, a thought strikes him. He still has one card left to play, his pet reptile. Sensing his distress, the little dragon clings to his robe, clearly worried. Han-Sia, barely able to get the words out, mentally urges the dragon that if it really wants to get out of there, it needs to listen to him. Apologizing internally for having to rely on such lousy taming skills, he locks eyes with the dragon and silently asks if it can lend him a hand. Responding to his unspoken plea, the cute reptile unfurls its wings and approaches the spellcaster with an aura that belies its small size. Then, without hesitation, it releases a powerful flamethrower, the flames enveloping the man. He screams in pain and confusion, utterly shocked by the sudden appearance of such a formidable beast. Not exactly what he expected from a harmless kid and his pet. The spellcaster writhes in agony, and the spectral hand around Han-Sia's neck vanishes, finally freeing him. He gasps for breath, relief flooding through him as he realizes he's still alive, all thanks to his unlikely but powerful companion. Looks like this little dragon is more than just a cute face. The little dragon watches intently as the man burns, ensuring the threat is thoroughly eliminated. Once the danger passes, the dragon returns to Han Siha, roaring softly, as if asking if he's okay. Han Siha doesn't quite expect things to turn out this way, but he feels immensely grateful to have such a trustworthy companion by his side. Smiling, he is caught off guard when the cute reptile jumps onto him, and the two share a comforting moment. Han Siha gently tells the little dragon that he owes it his life and promises to take care of it from now on. But first they need to get out of there. An hour later, the two venture through a harsh desert, trying to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the dark mages. However, the relentless heat of the sun is exhausting and Han Siha becomes increasingly thirsty. The little reptile also shows clear signs of fatigue and thirst. Determined, Han Siha vows to himself that he will never allow those dark mages to catch him again, knowing full well that it would mean certain death. Not far away, Han Siha spots a carriage and quickly approaches it, asking the old driver if they could possibly get a ride. The old man, sizing him up, asks if he has the money to pay for it. Without hesitation, Han Siha checks his robe pocket and finds a gold card. Showing it to the old man, he asks if it would be enough for the ride. The old man's eyes widen in shock upon seeing the card, recognizing it as one provided by Ardell Academy, a card that confers certain privileges. After reconsidering, the old man eventually agrees to let them in. Grateful, Han Siha and his little dragon thank the driver and take their seats in the carriage. As they settle in, the old man asks where they are headed. Han Siha hesitates, realizing he has rushed out without a clear plan, but knowing that the dark mages are likely already on his trail and will kill him to prevent any information from leaking, he has no choice but to go to the one place where people might still want him dead. Ironically, it's also the safest place he can think of to hide for the time being, the Ardell Academy. Meanwhile, a lady rushes into the grand entrance of Ardell Academy. She is Selen, a second-year assistant professor who can't help but admire the Academy's luxurious marble floors and elegant chandeliers. Even the students' uniforms exude an air of refinement, she thinks, as she waves gracefully to the passing students. But her pleasant demeanor suddenly falters when her gaze lands on a ghostly figure emerging from an old, dusty carriage. To her utter shock, Han Siha steps out, covered in dust from head to toe, his robe tattered and his expression weary. The stark contrast between him and the pristine surroundings nearly makes Selen collapse in horror. She can hardly believe her eyes. Someone so unkempt entering their immaculate academy. Selen stares down at him with a mix of disbelief and disdain, wondering how on earth a student like him ends up here. Meanwhile, Han Siha, now feeling somewhat refreshed by the fresh air, remains blissfully unaware of the professor's horrified reaction. Selen is deeply concerned that this disheveled boy, Han Siha, might tarnish the Academy's sterling reputation on the very first day of the semester. She recalls that Han Siha is someone who nearly failed due to his inability to control his innate magical talent. Meanwhile, Han Siha keeps his cute reptile hidden inside his robe, though the little dragon is restless and eager to be freed. Noticing the frantic professor, Han Siha approaches her and asks if he's late. She confirms that he is, her eyes narrowing as she looks him up and down. She reflects that he's not worthy of such attention, adding that she doesn't have time to worry about a failure with no potential. Selen recalls the rumors about Han Siha, how people say he's creepy, with a suspicious interest in black magic. There are even stories about him being a lunatic who engages in bizarre rituals with life-size dolls every night. Convinced that getting involved with him would only bring trouble, she taps his shoulder and urges him to hurry inside, wanting to rid herself of the nuisance as quickly as possible. Han Siha, however, thanks her with an appreciative and unexpectedly bright smile, assuring her that he will come earlier from now on. The positive vibe Han Siha gives off leaves Selen stunned and shocked as she watches him enter the building. As a second-year professor, she realizes her perspective has shifted. She finds herself watching him thoughtfully as he walks inside. Once inside the room, Han Siha quickly attracts attention from his classmates, who start murmuring and gossiping about him. They label him as creepy and make snide remarks about his recent entrance, noting that he arrived by carriage and looked poor. They look down on him and criticize his behavior, dismissing him as someone unworthy of their time. Han Siha, however, remains calm, ignoring the chatter around him. He reflects on his situation, resigned to the fact that he's likely doomed to be a minor, crazed villain character in this story. Sitting alone at the back of the room, he overhears his classmates speculating about how he managed to advance. They suggest it must have been due to some favor from a professor, wondering if his family had bribed someone for his advancement or if a professor had recognized his potential and written him a recommendation. Han Siha decides that his top priority is to figure out how to survive in this dark fantasy novel using his own strength. He breaks down his survival goals into two main objectives. First, he needs to find a quiet place to lie low, but since he hasn't found that yet, it's not an immediate concern. As a third-rate villain known for being violent and incompetent, he faces the very real risk of meeting a gruesome end, like being buried alive by the protagonist. Not exactly the retirement plan he had in mind. He notes with some relief that the Academy's closure for the year means he has a bit of time, though the exact reason for his character's death remains unclear. It could be due to unresolved loose ends or other crimes he's unaware of. Determined to avoid a similar fate, he resolves to live quietly and cautiously. Better to die of hard work than be buried alive, he muses. His second plan is to graduate safely by adapting and making a life in this new world. He aims to secure his future, knowing that while his family is wealthy, they have disowned him due to his past behavior. Therefore, obtaining his diploma becomes a crucial goal, a reliable way to ensure a stable future and make a living. Survival 101. Don't get buried alive and get that diploma. He decides that instead of getting involved with the protagonist and risking his own death, he would much rather live quietly as an ordinary student. He resolves to do everything in his power to block any scenario that could lead to his untimely end. Just then their professor enters and everyone greets him. The students murmur about the intense aura the professor exudes. Hansia quickly recognizes him as Professor Grint from the magic department. While Hansia tries to stay relaxed, his classmates express concern about the upcoming exams, commenting on how intimidating Professor Grint is. The professor silences the chatter, acknowledging that the students who advance to the second year are indeed impressive. He even mentions noticing a few students who stand out. Hansia silently agrees, noting that the presence of promising students, including the protagonist, raises the overall quality of the academy. He reflects on how Ardell Academy accepts students aged 14 to 19 and is renowned for its rigorous curriculum. Thanks to its top-notch students winning competitions, the academy has become more like a competitive arena. However, only about 10% of students manage to graduate with high honors, a statistic that Hansia finds daunting given the intense competition. Hansia wonders how he could possibly compete with the protagonist. He recalls that in the original plot, Hansia joined the Black Magic organization and then rapidly grew in the ranks using the power of black magic, a path that seems nearly impossible for him right now as he just wants to live quietly. Just as these thoughts swirl in his mind, Professor Grint announces that many students do not meet the required standards and that those lacking skills will not be allowed to join his class. The announcement hits Hansia like a punch to the gut, especially when the professor gives him a serious look, as if scrutinizing him specifically. It feels as though the professor is already marking him as one of the unworthy. Meanwhile, Professor Grint announces the opening exam schedule and then taps the ground with his walking stick, causing an illusionary display to appear before them. Hansia is stunned, his expression reflecting pure amazement. It's like seeing high-definition magic in action. He marvels at the sophisticated level of the spell, noting how advanced the illusion is. The display reveals that, based on his experience over the past year, he needs to choose 3 subjects and take both written and practical exams for each one. Hansia is impressed by the top-notch magic used by the Academy, but he quickly realizes that being able to choose his exam subjects freely could be an advantage. However, he's not naive. He suspects there might be a twist, knowing nothing in this world comes without a catch. His suspicions grow as the professor announces that he will personally draw the students' names from a box to determine the order in which they will select their subjects. Hansia silently curses his luck, feeling as if fate is playing yet another cruel joke on him. Given his current lack of knowledge about magic, relying on luck for the exam feels like a disaster waiting to happen. He knows his best option is to pick his subjects early and try to manage his grades, but he can't shake the feeling that his luck has already been exhausted just by escaping the Dark Magicians. If only he had a luck potion stashed somewhere. And just as he ponders his next move, the professor draws a ball from the box and, to his dismay, announces that the first person to choose their subjects will be Hansia. Hansia is surprised and somewhat relieved to have the first pick, feeling that his luck hasn't completely run out. He begins to look at the available subjects and quickly realizes that, given his unfamiliarity with magic, he needs to avoid anything too practical or related to necromancy, as those are clear death traps in the story. However, as he reviews the subjects, they all seem difficult, leaving him struggling to choose a suitable one. Finally, he spots a subject that appears manageable: exploration of arithmetic and magic formulas. Though the name initially sounds incredibly daunting, he decides it's the easiest option available. He figures that since he's good at memorization, he might be able to manage it somehow. Just as he finalizes his choice, he overhears his peers discussing his selection. They're relieved he picked arithmetic, as they've been struggling with it themselves. Ignoring their ridicule, Hansia decides to quickly choose his remaining 2 subjects and sit down. Just then, his eyes sparkle as he spots a subject that seems doable, giving him a small sense of relief. Finally, a tiny glimmer of hope in this academic minefield. Later in the library, where Hansia studies quietly, he reflects on his past life as an intern veterinarian. The subjects he chose remind him somewhat of his major in veterinary science, giving him a small sense of familiarity in this strange new world. He decides to focus first on exploration of arithmetic and magic formulas, acknowledging that while the arithmetic methods are unique to this world, his might be able to apply his math formulas. After finishing his studies on arithmetic and magic, he moves on to a book titled Monster Anatomy, an introduction to basic taming and behavioral science. Immersed in his studies, he temporarily forgets about his pet dragon inside his bag. However, other students passing by begin to grow suspicious and curious about the moving bag, making it increasingly difficult for him to ignore. His cute reptile, eager to stretch its wings, causes a bit of trouble as it tries to escape. Hansia discreetly pushes the reptile back into the bag, determined to keep it hidden to avoid drawing attention. Despite its playful attempts to come out, he knows that revealing his pet could cause a scene, something he definitely wants to avoid. Hansia realizes that bringing his pet to the library, while initially seeming like a good idea, has only created more trouble. With too many curious eyes around, he has no choice but to leave the library. He reflects on the fact that, as Hansia, who struggles with magic control, taming a dragon hatchling could easily cause suspicion and attract unwanted attention. Not exactly the low profile he's aiming for. He promises himself to be more cautious in the future. After leaving the library, Hansia heads to the underground training area of the academy. There he finally lets his cute reptile run freely, encouraging it to behave like the wild beast it is, knowing that this area is a safe place for it to roam. He considers that since he has managed to grasp the theory of taming to some extent, this would be a good opportunity to practice his skills in a controlled environment. Now standing before a staff member managing the training ground, Hansia requests an entry ticket to the beginner practice area. The staff member seems surprised when she sees his cute reptile. She expresses her amazement that he would bring such a creature to the beginner area and asks for its name. Hansia suddenly realizes with shock that he hasn't named his pet yet. Scrambling for an idea, he asks the reptile what its name is. The cute dragon, scratching its head in confusion, eventually chirps something with a happy reaction. Seeing this as a sign, Hansia decides it's time to choose a proper name for his pet. However, as he continues to think, the cute reptile becomes visibly frustrated with his indecision. Hansia throws out names like Drake, Carcharodontosaurus, and even Charizard, thinking they are the coolest options he can come up with. But the reptile, with an intense aura that hints at its fiery nature, makes it clear that if he doesn't choose a good name, there might be consequences, possibly of the roasted variety. Realizing he needs to pick carefully, Hansia finally settles on the name Basilisk. To his relief, the cute reptile brightens up at the sound of it, clearly pleased with the choice. Crisis averted, and with a pretty cool name too. The girl registers the name Basilisk and informs Hansia that the training area can accommodate up to 2 people, mentioning that there is currently 1 person in the other room. After this, she guides them to the weaponry room, explaining that it's a rental service available for students like them. Hansia notes that the weapons seem pretty subpar, possibly because they're free. Still, he decides not to be picky. After all, he wants to get stronger and should be grateful for whatever he receives. He selects a shield and a wand stick, figuring they'll do for now. Once prepared, the girl leads them to the gate of the beginner practice area. As she opens it, Hansia feels a mix of worry, astonishment, and excitement. Inside, he's amazed to find that the place resembles a beautiful garden, far more serene than he expected. As they explore, he spots 2 block slimes and remarks that even low-level monsters here seem somewhat kind-hearted. However, Hansia isn't feeling particularly kind himself today. He asks Basilisk if it sees the slimes, and upon receiving confirmation, he declares with a determined grin that he intends to blow them up. Basilisk, stunned and shocked by his master's cold intention, shakes in disbelief. But with no other choice, the cute dragon goes ahead and annihilates the block slimes while Hansia watches. Observing Basilisk's actions, Hansia notes that the dragon's behavior is even colder than he anticipated. Who knew the little guy would take such pleasure in playing with those monsters? It appears that Basilisk's dragon instincts are awakening, something natural given his genes. He then decides it's time to focus on practicing and improving his own skills and abilities. Venturing further into the area, he hears the noisy echoes of beasts and suddenly feels an attack. Quickly turning around, he's stunned but manages to react in time, defending himself. It seems the block slime monsters are seeking revenge, a swift and sticky result of his earlier actions. Karma really doesn't waste time in this world. Hansia sees the block slimes gathering in groups and quickly realizes he can't defeat them all due to his lack of strength. However, with Basilisk by his side and a bit of strategy, he knows they can take them down one by one. Just as he's considering his next move, Basilisk finishes off what remains of the slime he was toying with and returns to him. Hansia asks Basilisk if he's stretched enough and shares his plan they need to replicate their earlier success. Responding eagerly to the command, Basilisk launches an attack using his flamethrower on the monsters. A powerful burst of destructive force emerges and the slimes disappear like dust in the wind. Hansia is shocked, not expecting his cute Basilisk to have become even more powerful. He praises Basilisk, calling it promising an excellent job, and insists they must keep pushing, improving their skills and practicing like crazy. Half a day passes and they both find themselves lying on the ground, utterly exhausted. Victory may taste sweet, but it sure takes a lot out of you. Hansia remarks to himself that while practicing his magic, he's been constantly switching between taming Basilisk and casting offensive spells. Now he genuinely feels like he might keel over from exhaustion. Observing his pet, he notices that Basilisk is listening to him well, responding to his commands with surprising obedience. He vows that when they return to the dorm, he'll reward Basilisk with some delicious food. After all, even a dragon deserves a treat for a job well done. As he says this, he notices that Basilisk is already fast asleep nearby, completely worn out from the day's efforts. Just then, Hansia notices some commotion below and goes to check it out. He discovers the students mentioned by the staff member earlier, the one who had been training in the area before him. It appears that this student's beast is playing around, scooping up mud, while the girl, kneeling in despair, is visibly frustrated because her beast isn't listening to her. Not exactly the ideal training session she had in mind. Her face shows a simmering anger, ready to explode at any moment. After a brief moment of frustration, the girl calms herself and stands up, determined to try again to command her beast. She gives it her best effort, but it's clear the creature isn't comfortable with her. It remains cautious, barking at her in defiance. Meanwhile, Hansia observes her attempt to tame the hellhound and can't help but comment that her approach is all wrong. He notes that she shouldn't be handling her beast in such a way. As the girl kneels and shouts for the beast to come back and sit, it ignores her completely and runs off. Frustrated, she searches for her unruly pet, complaining bitterly that the little bastard isn't listening to her. She angrily swears that if she catches it, the beast will regret it. As she continues her search, she stumbles upon a surprising sight. Her troublesome beast has become gentle and is now obediently sitting with Hansia. As she approaches with a determined stride, the girl wonders how the second-year student, Hansia, managed to tame her pet so easily. Noticing her, Hansia asks if the beast is her pet and mentions that he's been observing her efforts for a while. He calmly advises that her approach to taming the beast is wrong. The girl, taken aback, looks confused and a bit deflated. Hansia explains that when a tamer becomes too emotional, it only agitates the beast further. This surprises her. She hadn't expected advice from someone like Hansia. As she processes his words, she reflects on her status at Ardell Academy, the most prestigious school in the Empire. This girl, Ardell, an earth mage, has never ranked lower than third despite her commoner background and the many challenges she has faced. Few can match her skill. However, it was said that due to the opening exams being conducted by lottery, Ardell ended up drawing the subject she was weakest in, Introduction to Basic Taming. She blames her predicament on sheer bad luck, fully aware that her taming skills are far from impressive. That's why she's here, to practice and hopefully improve. But what really baffles her is Hansia, the boy who couldn't even manage to tame a slime last year, a failure she had witnessed with her own eyes. There are also rumors swirling around about his obsession with black magic, which only added to her perception of him as gloomy, inferior, and a hopeless case. Yet here he is now, successfully taming her beast and making her usually gentle hellhound almost obsessed with him. Talk about an unexpected plot twist. Astonished by this turn of events, she asks him how he managed to do it. Hansia calmly responds that her beast is no longer agitated and that she can take it back now. Grateful for the advice, she picks up her beast and thanks him. Curious, Hansia then inquires why she chose a hellhound, noting that it's quite a challenge for a first-time tamer. With pride, she explains that a difficult monster like the hellhound holds high value for her, especially since it's her first attempt in the subject. She wants to prove herself, even if it means taking on a beast that's more than a little fiery. Understanding her reasoning, Hansia jokingly suggests that she might prefer a less challenging pet, perhaps one that enjoys mud baths or something less daunting. Annoyed by his teasing, the girl sharply retorts, reminding him that everyone has witnessed his earlier failures even as she was taming her beast. Touché. Despite her irritation, she can't help but wonder about Hansia. He seems like the type who naturally fits in with others, speaking to her without hesitation, even though she's a commoner and he's a noble. As she observes him, she notices the creature beside him, a dragon hatchling. What surprises her the most is that Hansia has already tamed it, a rare feat for someone at their level. It's almost like he's done a complete 180 since last year. After that, they head together to the area where the block slimes are. Ardell asks Hansia if they're in the right location. It seems Hansia suggested this spot to Ardell as a place where she could practice and improve her cooperation with her beasts, helping them become more familiar with each other. Once Hansia confirms that this is the right location, Ardell gets to work. She pushes aside the vines and grass, revealing a group of block slimes hiding in the area. It's clearly a spawn point. Nothing like a little slime hunting to break the ice. Hansia casually mentions that he almost wiped them out earlier, but they respawned quickly. Hearing this, Ardell reassures him not to worry, confidently stating that she'll handle it. Drawing her sword with a determined gleam in her eye, she remarks that she can finish them off in a single hit. She orders Hansia to step aside for a moment as she prepares to engage the slimes. The slimes, not wanting to wait, attack first as soon as they spot her. But with a single powerful swing of her sword, Ardell annihilates them all, leaving a deep, destructive mark where she struck. Talk about overkill. Those slimes never stood a chance. Watching Ardell's display of power, Hansia is a bit amazed, though he can't resist teasing her, remarking that her aggressive methods seem like overkill, practically burying the slimes alive. Hearing this, Ardell grows angry and glares at him menacingly, but she manages to control her emotions, trying to respond calmly and act as if she's ignoring his comment. Not an easy feat, given his knack for pushing buttons. Meanwhile, a single slime, somehow surviving the onslaught, begins moving to attack her. To Ardell's surprise, Hansia suddenly uses magic to eliminate the slime. She's stunned. She distinctly remembers that he couldn't use proper magic before. Shocked, she finds herself lost in thought, unable to reconcile this new image of him with the one she had in mind. Hansia then asks if she hadn't noticed the slime coming back. Still in a state of shock, Ardell fumbles for an excuse, trying to claim she had known all along but just hadn't reacted. Before she can finish her sentence, Hansia starts to leave, calling for his cute basilisk to follow, casually saying they need to go. As he walks away, he adds almost offhandedly that it's a relief as she really had everything under control. Deep down, Ardell realizes the truth. She hadn't sensed the slime approaching from behind. She also notices that Hansia's spell, his arrow of magic, had a level of precision far beyond what she would expect from a beginner. Clearly, there's more to him than meets the eye. Just as Hansia begins to speak, her conversation is abruptly cut off by a sudden error in the dungeon, triggering an emergency alarm that echoes throughout the space. Both of them immediately become alert, tension rising as they try to assess the situation. Hansia asks if she knows of any device that could have caused this, but she has no idea either. Meanwhile, inside Principal's office, a man reports to the honorary principal that an emergency has occurred in the training ground dungeon. The principal, concerned, asks if there has been an error with the spell and inquires about the current situation inside the dungeon, specifically which students are present. The man replies that 2 students of second year are inside, Ardell and a student named Hansia. Because of course where there's trouble, Hansia seems to be right in the middle of it. Hearing this, the principal sighs and remarks that Hansia is a troublemaker, implying that even if the boy were to perish, it wouldn't be a significant loss. However, he notes that the other student, a girl named Ardell, is a different case entirely, promising and talented. Her safety is of utmost concern. The principal laments that Hansia lacks both talent and skill, speculating that he likely won't survive the dangers of an error-ridden dungeon. He explains that if there is indeed a flaw in the dungeon's magical formula, the monsters within could grow abnormally large and become far stronger than their usual level. Emphasizing again that Hansia has virtually no chance of survival, the principal advises the staff to mentally prepare themselves for the potential outcome. It seems the odds are heavily stacked against our boy as usual. Back in the dungeon, the tension mounts as the 2 students unknowingly face these dire predictions. Hansia and Ardell seem fine for the moment, having managed to defeat several slime monsters. However, the situation quickly escalates as the monsters keep coming. Ardell grows increasingly frustrated, exclaiming that the monsters are becoming even more terrifying and that the place has turned into hell in an instant. Agitated, she shouts that there seems to be no end to the onslaught as the slimes keep respawning over and over. In a fit of panic, she swears she'll never look at a slime again. While Ardell panics, Hansia finds her words somewhat amusing but can't help feeling a bit concerned. He notices that despite the relentless waves of monsters, Ardell seems exhausted yet still surprisingly composed. Observing her, he comments to himself that although her timing skills may be amateurish, her swordsmanship is on par with the professionals. Not bad for someone swearing off slimes forever. Hansia begins to wonder if Ardell could be Earth Mage destined to become a great sorcerer, or perhaps more accurately, a great mage swordsman. It strikes him as odd that someone as fearsome as her would be rolling around in a beginner practice area like this. When it comes to Earth mages, the term mage swordsman is fairly common, but still, her presence here feels unusual. Despite her short temper, Hansia finds it remarkable that she isn't openly looking down on him. He admires her personality, finding it quite impressive as he ponders over her character. Meanwhile, Ardell notices that Hansia seems distracted, not paying attention to the monsters and appearing relaxed while she does all the hard work. She thinks Hansia is being a bit of a creep and questions why he's nodding to himself instead of helping out in the fight. Hansia, slightly amused by her frustration, points out that they've been stuck in the dungeon for over 3 hours and wonders why there hasn't been any response from the outside to help them. It seems as though no one knows there's a problem, which might explain the lack of response, he muses while glancing upward. Ardell, with a mix of irritation and practicality, responds that it couldn't be helped since only about 30 minutes have passed outside, as time inside the dungeon moves slower than it does outside. This, she explains, is actually an advantage for them, as it allows them to train more effectively. Hearing this, Hansia understands why there hasn't been any response yet. He adds that even if they were aware of the situation and came to rescue them, they'd still have several hours to hold out. They would need to endure and keep fighting the slime monsters until the rescuers arrived, which seems nearly impossible. Ardell, listening to his words, feels her temper boiling over again. She demands to know why he has to say such unlucky things, as if he is suggesting they just sit here and wait to die. Hansia, with a sarcastic tone, replies that he would never do that and seems oddly pleased with himself as he says it. As they continue to bicker, he asks her to buy him some time. Confused, Ardell demands to know what he's planning, but Hansia, clearly up to something, only tells her that she'll know when the time comes. He then asks her to keep the slime monsters from getting too close, reassuring her that it won't take long to do what he needs to do, because nothing says teamwork like a little mystery in the middle of a slime battle. Hearing this, Ardell demands to know why she has to handle it alone and questions what Hansia plans to do in the meantime. But Hansia, completely ignoring her protests, begins executing his plan. As Ardell watches him walk away with an angry and irritated expression, Hansia feels a sense of self-satisfaction, thinking that his initial judgment about her was spot on. Nothing like a little smugness in the heat of battle. Meanwhile, their cute companion, Basilisk, seems worried about Ardell, but Hansia reassures him that he has everything under control. As he walks, he notices some glowing vines emitting light. Remembering what he had read about these vines in the story, he realizes he knows exactly how to deal with them, because every plan needs a little light at the end of the tunnel, or in this case, glowing vines. According to the original novel, the Error Dungeon was designed to highlight the stark differences in ability between the protagonists, Li Han and Hansia. In the story, Hansia had previously tried and spectacularly failed at this very part of the dungeon, which involved dealing with these glowing vines. Now standing before the same challenge, Hansia is pleased to have found the vines. He instructs Basilisk to search the area for more of these unique vines, gather them, and bring them back. Basilisk carefully checks the area and, after completing his search, flies off to find more. While Basilisk is busy, Hansia continues to reflect on how readers of the novel had treated his characters so harshly. They had cursed the original Hansia as a stupid loser and evil guy for his failed attempts in this dungeon. Holding a unique vine in his hand, Hansia comments to himself that he doesn't believe Hansia deserves such abuse. Maybe this time he can rewrite the narrative, one vine at a time. Meanwhile, Ardell seems to be holding her own against the slimes, but her mana is running low. Frustrated, she demands to know why Hansia is taking so long, cursing him under her breath. Just as she's about to reach her limit, Hansia finally shows up, shouting that he's finished. Ardell turns around, surprised and a bit confused, seeing both Hansia and the mysterious vines arranged as if he had built a barricade. He signals her to hurry inside, and though she's still baffled by what he's doing, she follows his lead. Ardell, still a bit confused, suggests that they should handle things quietly, considering how quickly the slimes are regenerating. However, Hansia firmly insists that she get inside immediately. Once she's safely behind the barricade, he explains his plan. He's going to build a defensive wall using the vines and then eliminate the monsters outside of it by combining amplification magic with fire. This way, he can stop the slimes from regenerating and cause them to evaporate. Because when dealing with endless slimes, sometimes you just have to turn up the heat. With determination, Hansia casts his spell, creating a large green arrow using arrow magic. He adds with a grin that the only thing left to do is set the arrows on fire, because when in doubt, burn everything down, slime included. Turning to Basilisk, Hansia instructs, "It's your turn now." Basilisk's eyes glow with intensity as he begins setting the arrows on fire. Hansia then releases the flaming arrows beyond their barricade, where the slime monsters, surprised by the shining projectiles, meet their unexpected end in a large explosion. The beautiful shining arrows, reminiscent of fireworks, obliterate the slimes in a fiery display. Meanwhile, Ardell watches in amazement, hardly able to believe what she's seeing. She questions whether this could really be the same Han-Sia she knew. As the slimes evaporate and fail to regenerate, Han-Sia explains to her that when he buried the slimes and scattered their remains across the ground, he utilized the slime's poison, which has the property of exploding when exposed to fire magic. Ardell, still processing the spectacle, asks if he had also planned to prevent the rain of fire from reaching inside their barricade. Han-Sia, impressed by her observation, responds that it's a good point but assures her that the vines they used to build the barricade aren't ordinary. They're fire-resistant and immune to flames. Sometimes the best defense is a magical one. Now that everything around them is burning, they just need to wait for the rescue to arrive. With the situation seemingly under control, Han-Sia feels a sense of relief. Ardell, on the other hand, looks at him and reflects on the unlikeliness of being saved by someone like him. She muses that nobles at Ardell Academy typically couldn't care less about commoners' lives, so she wonders if Han-Sia has some ulterior motive. Noticing her deep thoughts, Han-Sia asks what she's thinking about and why she's looking at him that way. He assumes she's about to thank him for saving her life, despite her usually grumpy demeanor. To his surprise, Ardell, who is kind-hearted beneath her tough exterior, admits that she is indeed grateful, if only a little because she owes him her life. Hearing this, Han-Sia remarks that it's good to hear, and then with a hint of mischief, asks if she could do him a favor. Ardell, appearing worried and hesitant, wonders what the favor might be. She considers that if it's something simple, she wouldn't hesitate, but if it turns out to be something creepy, she might have to decline. Before she can finish her thoughts, Han-Sia cuts in, requesting that she keep everything that happened in the dungeon a secret. He asks her to keep confidential all that she witnessed, including taming the beast, capturing the error slime in one go, and building the barricade with the vines. Ardell realizes her suspicions were correct, but something still feels off. She starts to think that Han-Sia might be hiding something. Perhaps he's a bastard with a secret. As she mulls this over, she watches him pick up some slime orbs, further fueling her curiosity. After the dungeon cleanup is handled vaguely, the two professors who were initially confused about the sudden errors decide to reward the students who managed to close the dungeon without any major injuries. Following this event, they are even summoned to the dean's office. Later, as Han-Sia sits comfortably in the office, he appears relieved but somewhat indifferent. He acknowledges the value of the accumulated items and how they might come handy in graduation, but his primary focus remains on making his cute beast and himself stronger. With the dean absent, Han-Sia and Basilisk are alone in the office. He calls Basilisk over, and the little dragon happily trots to him with a bright smile on his face. As Basilisk approaches, Han-Sia checks his status. The display reveals that Basilisk attracts is a red dragon who is always cheerful, very serious about cheese, and quite friendly towards Han-Sia. It seems that Basilisk's flamethrower ability has significantly increased, and he has also acquired a new skill, toxicity resistance, during their encounter with the dungeon error. Han-Sia notes that while he remains unsure about what the Dark Magician organization is up to, he knows that Basilisk originally came from the basement, hinting at a connection between the organization and that place. Despite the mystery surrounding Basilisk's origins, Han-Sia expresses pride in his cute dragon, acknowledging that Basilisk is not only a valuable dragon but also a hatchling with outstanding talent and potential. He praises Basilisk for his impressive growth rate, precise control of breath, and immense magic power, which leaves him even more amazed by how truly overwhelming the little dragon is in every aspect. Determined to raise him properly, Han-Sia reflects on the effort he's put in, even sweating over the task. Now he tells Basilisk that he has gone through a lot to raise him, a sentiment that resonates with the dragon as he listens attentively. Han-Sia then takes out a slime orb from his bag, showing it to Basilisk and explaining that it's an overpowered item. With a playful smile, he asks if it looks delicious, suggesting that Basilisk should give it a try. However, Basilisk seems disgusted and hesitant, as if he believes the orb might be poisonous. Despite Basilisk's reluctance, Han-Sia convinces him to take a bite, assuring him that it's not only safe but also beneficial. One or two wouldn't be fatal, after all. After some hesitation, Basilisk eventually tries the orb, but to his horror, the taste is so unpleasant that he ends up vomiting. Observing this, Han-Sia can't help but think the taste must have been absolutely terrible, especially since he hadn't tried it himself and had no idea what it tasted like. Maybe drive-in treats aren't as tasty as they sound. Still, he notes with a smile that despite the awful taste, the stats of his little beast seem to have changed. It appears that Basilisk's magic power and toxicity resistance have increased after eating the orb. Han-Sia explains to himself that the slime orbs amplify the consumer's stats, with just one orb capable of boosting even basic mana stats, something that usually takes a long time to improve. To his surprise, Basilisk, despite the initial revulsion, becomes addicted to the orbs and starts consuming them all as if there were no tomorrow. Just as Basilisk devours the slime orbs, his stats rapidly increase, much to Hansia's delight. He sits back listening to the satisfying notification sounds, which feel like a well-deserved reward. Just then, there's a knock on the door. Curious about who it might be, Hansia opens the door to find Ardell, who bursts in with an intense tone. However, her stern demeanor quickly fades as she breaks into a joke, returning to her usual kind self. Ardell explains that she had been searching for him everywhere and finally found him in the dean's office. Hansia wonders if she was called there to receive items as well. Ardell then demands to know if he truly doesn't care about giving her all the credit for dealing with the error slime monster. She hints that this would make her more well-known and result in her receiving more items than him. Hansia, scratching his head, responds nonchalantly that he really doesn't care about it, suggesting she lower her voice because his ears are hurting from her loudness. He reflects that life is more important than such items and mentions that if rumors spread about him clearing the dungeon, it could cause unnecessary trouble. Fame, Hansia muses, could track the dark organization, which might ultimately lead to his demise if they discover he was living well and freely. He adds that he has no desire to be famous like the protagonist. Meanwhile, Ardell asks him if he is doing it out of sympathy. He can keep it to himself as she doesn't want it either. This creates a somewhat dramatic atmosphere, leaving Hansia puzzled as to why she's being so problematic. Abruptly, he tells her that he doesn't need to sympathize with someone he doesn't even know. Ardell, stunned for a moment, then approaches him angrily, demanding to know how he could say he doesn't know her. Hansia, seemingly irritated, covers his ears as her words come at him like a machine gun. Sarcastically, he asks if he's supposed to know her and inquires about her name, wanting to confirm if she's the person he had read about in the novel. When Ardell says her name is Ardell Stivia, Hansia's jaw drops in shock. He quickly connects the dots and realizes who she is. He reflects that he knows exactly who she is, Ardell Stivia, the great magician from a commoner's background who has consistently ranked in the top 3 at the academy. The realization hits him hard. The main character who cruelly buried him alive in the story is now standing in front of him, introducing herself and asking if he knew who she was. Talk about a twist of fate. He's face to face with his own literary executioner. Hansia thinks to himself, panicking that the person standing in front of him is destined to end his life in the future. It feels like some higher power has cursed him with a grim fate, and now, encountering her here, he can't help but feel incredibly unlucky. Overthinking the situation, he worries that his head might explode from the stress, muttering to himself that he's going crazy from this misfortune. Ardell, noticing his paranoid state, asks if he ever looks at himself in the mirror. Without waiting for a response, she pulls him over to a nearby mirror. She remarks that she can't imagine someone like him coming to the dean's office to receive an item. Seeing his reflection for the first time since being reincarnated in Hansia's body, he is shocked by his filthy and shabby appearance. He had imagined himself as a handsome man, but the reality is far from it. He realizes that people avoid him not out of fear, but out of sheer disgust. So much for being the dashing rogue, turns out he's just the town's unkempt mystery. Despite his initial shock, Hansia remains confident and resolves to make some changes, starting with fixing his hair before improving his overall appearance. The next day, when he walks into the classroom, he makes a grand and unexpected entrance. His classmates immediately start discussing him, wondering if he's a new student. They speculate that the handsome man must be a transfer student, if something about him seems oddly familiar. As some of his classmates take a closer look, they recognize him, noting that he's indeed Hansia, not a new student, just drastically different in appearance. Others comment that he seems like a completely different person altogether. As Hansia takes his seat, the room buzzes with chatter about him. He jokes to himself that he must be handsome enough for everyone to be talking about him. Suddenly, one of his classmates asks if he has received some kind of polymorph treatment, expressing a desire to become as good-looking as him and eagerly asking for his secret. Hansia remembers that this young man with red hair is named Creek, who comes from a commoner's background and is trying to boss him around. Since Hansia is not the original Hansia, he isn't so easily bullied. As Creek continues to mock him, calling him a pathetic loser, Hansia tries to ignore him, but the situation quickly escalates. Creek insinuates that cutting his hair must have made him lose his mind. Hansia, who harbors a strong dislike for people with talkative mouths, decides he can't tolerate this behavior any longer. Calmly, he warns Creek that if he doesn't stop talking, he'll have no choice but to silence him. Undeterred, Creek retorts that he's big enough to speak up, especially since Hansia has been abandoned by his own family. Hansia shoots back, advising him not to talk big. Meanwhile, their cute but formidable Basilisk emerges from Hansia's bag, exuding a domineering aura and an icy chill. The intense vibes between them leave Creek trembling and nervous. Nothing like a dragon to make a bully reconsider his life choices. Hansia's classmates are shocked, commenting that an ordinary student couldn't possibly possess such a beastly presence. Despite the pressure, Creek remains defiant, refusing to back down as he continues mocking Hansia. He doesn't even think twice about his words, looking down on Basilisk as if the dragon were insignificant. Meanwhile, Hansia reflects on how he had planned to live cautiously and quietly, but he reminds himself that he never agreed to endure humiliation in silence. With this thought, he responds calmly, remarking that it's a pity for someone as foolish as Creek to pick the wrong opponent. Hansia addresses him as a stupid commoner, and with just that, he can see the anger boiling over in Creek, who barks insults like a dog, growing more enraged with each word. Hansia, however, finds amusement in watching Creek lose his composure, taunting him as if he were taming a wild beast. He comments on how easily Creek is provoked, losing his cool over just a few words. Hansia's sharp tongue and sarcastic tone have completely shifted the power dynamic. Now he's the one bullying the bully. With a bright smile, he pats Basilisk's head and remarks, "Even a dragon hatchling can make an impact, as you've seen. It's not about size, it's about capability." He then turns to the boy, teasingly asking if he's afraid it might actually bite. Creek is clearly unsettled, and Hansia continues to taunt him, warning that if he ends up dead, there would be no way to bring him back. Unable to contain his anger, the boy shouts in frustration, demanding to know if Hansia is serious and insisting that he needs to learn his limits. Sensing Creek's growing agitation, Hansia decides to add fuel to the fire. He challenges Creek to wait for the results of the opening exam, confident that then they'll see who truly comes out on top. The boy is stunned, clearly not expecting such a sudden and bold challenge. After class, as Hansia walking back to his dorm, reflecting on the day's events, he recalls how Creek had arrogantly told him that if he could beat him, he would bark like a dog. Hansia had thanked him for making the negotiation so easy, sealing her bet with a smug grin. Now, as he walks, Hansia thinks to himself that all he has to do is wait and see, because soon enough Creek might just have to keep his word and start barking. And oh, what a satisfying sound that will be. This situation brings back memories of Hansia's previous life, where he was known for being good at cleaning up his messes. That's why others called him a scumbag intern. He always stood up against injustice and never lost to anyone, a fact he was proud of. As he basks in his memories, he's suddenly interrupted by his classmates. They ask if he's really planning to kick Creek's ass this time, adding that he'd be lucky just to pass the exam. Mocking him, they question how he even dared to challenge Creek, implying he's fooling himself and suggesting that they can't wait to see him bark like a dog. Hansia remains calm, ignoring their taunts. He thinks to himself that people like them exist in any world, those who won't leave others alone even if they're doing well. So what should he do in this situation? Leave them be or make a move? Hansia then turns to the yellow-haired guy and demands his name. The guy, sensing something bad is about to happen, nervously asks why Hansia cares, but Hansia cuts him off, insisting on hearing his name. The boy, left with no choice, reveals it, Fabian Den Edwin. As he says it, he seems to shake with panic, asking if Hansia didn't already know who he was. Hearing this, Hansia quickly recalls where he's heard the name before. Fabian Den Edwin, the arrogant prince who used his position to manipulate weaker people and led a group of malicious bullies, often targeting Hansia. Without further ado, Hansia plays his hidden card, opening his bag to reveal the cute yet formidable Basilisk. At that moment, Basilisk looks up, confused, having no idea what his master is planning to do with him. When Fabian sees the dragon, he's shocked, completely unprepared for Hansia to use it against him. It's not every day you see a prince go pale at the sight of a cute, albeit deadly, dragon. Fabian nervously asks what Hansia plans to do by showing him the dragon. Our cute little Basilisk stares at him with a gleaming look, and suddenly it jumps toward him. Fabian and his friends are caught off guard, and in a panic, his friends quickly flee, leaving him behind as he shouts for help. Later, Hansia has finished his practice and is sitting down when Ardell approaches him. She asks if he has heard the new rumors spreading around, noting that this time the rumors are no joke. She advises him that for his own well-being, it would be best not to mess with royalty, specifically referring to the boy named Fabian, whom Hansia had recently bullied. Hearing this, Hansia calmly responds that he doesn't care about the rumors because those bastards were the ones who started it. He was simply teaching them some manners. Ardell reflects on how she initially thought Hansia was just a noble thug who took out his anger on commoners like her. But now she believes he might be more than just any noble, perhaps even an imperial prince who resorts to biting anyone he dislikes. However, as she thinks more about it, she finds Hansia a bit more tolerable than she had first imagined. With a happy expression, she tells him he's surely hopeless. As she says this, she approaches him, asking if all nobles like him are completely lacking in common sense. She remarks that not only did he have his dragon bite some bullies, but he also made a random bet with Creek. From her perspective, trying to beat Creek in a test seems reckless. Extending her hand to him, Ardell continues, saying that if she hadn't helped him, who knows what might have happened. Hansia looks at her with a confused expression and then notes that she's also learning from him how to tame her beast, while in exchange, she's teaching him how to evaluate her magic. A fair trade, even if it's not the kind of tutoring either of them expected. She then playfully tells him to forget it and suggests they start their practice training. She challenges him, saying that if he can defeat her, it would mean he has a chance to beat Creek too. With an excited expression, Hansia confidently assures Ardell that he will defeat Creek. The two of them then begin their match, with Ardell taking the first move by casting a spell at him. Hansia quickly goes on the defensive, casting a barrier around his body as a shield. As Ardell unleashes her attack magic, a large explosion occurs, marking the intensity of their special training session. Time passes quickly, and soon the day of the entrance exam they had both been eagerly awaiting finally arrives. Ardell has just finished her evaluation, and the professor is analyzing her results with only her final score left to be announced. The professor then reveals that she completed her magic exam in just 5 minutes and 31 seconds, awarding her a grade. Ardell beams with happiness and thanks her professor, clearly proud of her achievement. Meanwhile, Hansia watches her celebrate her success. He reflects that despite having his past life's experience and memories, it's clear that when it comes to talent, Ardell is truly exceptional. Her first attempt at taming a beast was remarkable. She is indeed a prodigy and a leading character in her own right. And that was it for today. I hope that you liked today's video, and if you did, hit that like button, as today's like goal is 1,500 likes. Comment part 2 down below for the next part. Also, consider subscribing with the notification bell on to get notified as soon as a new video drops onto the channel. You can also join the channel to support me financially and watch videos before public release. I'll meet you in the next video. Until then, thanks for watching.